infants and children, some parents even clinging onto their children, suffocating in their homes and in an emergency shelter, many with foam in their mouths. It isn't clear what substance was used, but it does appear to be far more powerful than some of the previous chlorine attacks that we've seen. The Assad regime is denying allegations of using chemical weapons, not only this time, but all the previous accusations as well, though the U.S. and other Western powers have said there is clear evidence the Assad regime has and is using chemical weapons.
Disappointing and missing even the lowest expectations. Those were just some of the reactions over the Philippines' second quarter economic growth figure. And it was indeed the slowest expansion since 2015 and well below government's 7 to 8% target range. But economic managers say the Philippines was still among the fastest growing in Asia, next to Vietnam and China, and ahead of Indonesia. Mining and agriculture were cited as among the...
Kaba and Deku, aged just 8. They passed school children fortunate enough to be going the other way. 2 hours later, they make it here, joining the ranks of the child laborers at Ruashi mines. They toil alongside fully grown men. It's all unofficial, but highly organized. Our trio work as a team. Their first job, sifting away the dirt.
This one, when we are going forward towards 2030, there will be some recognition and that it will be incorporated, their priorities, their concerns, their rights.
This year's forum will discuss the indigenous people's collective rights to lands, territories, and resources, and other threats facing the indigenous communities today.
And we hope that the end result will have positive impact to those communities who have been agitating when you talk about issues on land. And we hope
while leading the energy transition in Europe and aiming to be carbon neutral by 2045. Change can be really scary when so many jobs in Europe's many regions are dependent on coal. But it's inevitable, as the Swedes would tell you, considering how dependent their economy was on fossil fuels. And it's even more inevitable when you're competing in a globalized world and the giants are transitioning to green energy as well.
Of being China's most polluted. In fact, by some measures, it is the most polluted city on the planet over that period. Of course, it is just an extreme example of a problem affecting a huge swathe of northern China at the moment, with a pollution cloud hanging over this country from the Russian border in the far northeast all the way down to the central cities of Chongqing and Chengdu. A sweep of a few thousand kilometers or so. Of course,
an unprecedented fourth season without rains has left huge swatches of land in eastern Ethiopia bone dry and millions of people starving. Much of their livestock, which they depend on, has been wiped out. In some areas, people have lost up to 90% of their animals. Omar is one of those counting his losses. He tells me he had hundreds of cows, goats and camels, but they are now all dead and he fears for his future.
Called Dead Cities, a series of settlements abandoned over 1,000 years ago. They're part of Syria's heritage. But they're little known, and thanks to Syria's war, these historic treasures are at risk. And it's up to people like Nabil to protect them.
In the second half of 2012, I met with some colleagues to set up the Heritage Center in Idlib. The idea for it was to be an academic specialist center.
Going to investigate possible war crimes in Syria. The UN and a number of others have linked all sides in Syria's ongoing war to war crimes. The Syrian government has been accused of torturing thousands of civilians, using chemical weapons and bombing civilian neighborhoods and hospitals. Rebel factions fighting against forces loyal to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad have been accused of taking hostages to extort money. And ISIS has been accused of recruiting child soldiers, publicly executing civilians, and using homemade chemical weapons.
The last declaration on gender equality and empowerment in Africa was made in 2003 in Maputo, Mozambique. A declaration that sets a high pace for gender mainstreaming and equality in Africa. Although there has been progress and positive inflections on gender matters since then, 13 years after, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, is out with a Human Development Report asking
what to do with all the old people. Part of the answer, nursing homes, a new industry in China, and we're at one of the best in Beijing. There's not much to do. But there's help 24 hours a day. At 96, Du Boateng is the oldest man here. Long ago, members of his family died or moved away.
I lived at home, but then the place was pulled down. I found a little...
No one on board survived, and with dozens more being treated in hospital for their injuries, people want back to This nation and his Prime Minister warned that the attackers would not go unpunished.
A befitting reply will...
Protesters left hundreds dead. After 18 days, Mubarak resigned. It was a much different ending for Libya's